Today I want to revisit a point that I made in an earlier video about deciding clearly what you want before you start hiring for your biotech company. In that video, the last step I mentioned was to check alignment among the hiring team. And this is such an important and often forgotten part of effective talent acquisition that I feel like I should revisit it in more detail. Now, maybe you've been part of a hiring process where the CEO is looking for one kind of candidate, the hiring manager is trying to find something completely different, and HR are on the hunt for another profile again. If you have, you know how painful it can be. You'll miss out on great talent because nobody can agree on who fits the bill. You'll create an awful candidate experience because everybody's asking the same questions but wants different answers. So even if you manage to come to a final decision, your chosen hire no longer wants to come on board. And the job stays open for months, for a year, or even longer. The longest process I've been involved in lasted 2.5 years, from the job opening to the final hire. And it was only filled in the end by a candidate who I'd placed elsewhere 2 weeks before the search landed on my desk. And if that happens, then you're left covering the work of an already overstretched department. But this scenario isn't uncommon, and it's driven by a typical, very suboptimal process. Usually someone finds an old job description and either reuses it as is or updates it based solely on their view of what's important. Then they either go ahead and instruct whoever's doing the recruitment without much thought given to who else will be on the panel, or they send around an email with the job description attached. Should anyone actually read it, they do so through their own lens, and they approve or give feedback from a completely different place than the original author. Now multiply that by 3 or 4 panel members and you're already in really unclear territory. And then hiring begins. Now it's no surprise that it's tricky in that scenario. So I'd suggest a different approach. Start by taking the time to sit down and align the hiring team by having an actual conversation about the position you're hiring into. The line manager for the role should take the lead and prepare an initial job description, explaining what they mean by each criteria and responsibility that they've identified, and the intention behind them. Then open the floor to feedback. Is everyone's understanding of the job that needs to be done the same? Or are there blind spots in the line manager's brief? Now, it's important to note that there's no judgment here. Your only objective is to get as clear a picture as possible of the gap that needs to be filled. You should be paying close attention to language during this conversation because just agreeing on the words isn't enough. It's entirely feasible that one person's understanding of, for example, a great communicator with experience of external partnerships is completely different to someone else's. For the first person, this might mean an outgoing personality with a business development background. But for the other, it could be about presentations and report writing, as well as managing academic partnerships. So make sure you interrogate the assumptions behind the words to draw out disagreement. Then reduce the hiring criteria as much as you can. Most job descriptions carry way too many requirements and make it too difficult to find someone who matches all of them. What are the absolute fundamental necessary skills and experience? Everything else should be categorized as nice to have. Try to get down to 3 or 4 essential skills as a maximum. When there's general agreement about the criteria, the meaning of each point and the overall brief, now it's time to decide who will assess each part of it with the candidates that you meet. If you split the responsibility for interviewing and qualifying candidates amongst the hiring team, then you'll find you cover a lot more ground in more detail and get richer information than if each person runs off in their own direction. You can make sure each point is covered, and the candidates you interview will be much more impressed by your organization, by your preparation, and by the diversity of questions they face. And it's crucial too to agree what good looks like, point by point. Just agreeing on the criteria is a great start, but it's not enough. You must make sure that everyone on your panel is assessing candidates against the same bar at each stage. What level of certainty do you need from a CV to invite someone for a screening interview? And then what qualifies them at that screening interview for a full on-site meeting? And how fully do they need to tick the boxes in that meeting you've agreed to justify a hire? If you're the hiring manager, then it's really important to go into this conversation with an open mind, ready to change the brief if you need to. In small, agile biotech companies, roles will evolve as your programs progress, so it's unlikely that you'll need the same profile as you did last time around, and it's unlikely that you'll know every detail of how your team interacts with other parts of the business. Different perspectives will allow you to hire a much more effective person, and that's really your only objective here. Now, I do appreciate that all of this might sound like a lot, but it's not as onerous as it might seem. In most cases, unless there's major disagreement, this is less than a 30-minute meeting, and the consequences of not aligning are significant. Do you want to hire the wrong person? Do you want to waste hours speaking with candidates that no one can agree on? Do you want the position to be open for 6 months or 12 or even longer? So is it worth spending half an hour getting alignment so that you can avoid those things?